One of the common questions we get a lot is, what is earnest money? Earnest money is in a sense is your commitment of how much skin you're willing to put into the game if you're the buyer and you're trying to buy a property. So in other words, if you make an offer of $100,000 that you're going to buy a house and you put $10,000 worth of earnest money up, that shows a strong commitment to the seller that you're willing to see that transaction all the way through to the end. Now, how much earnest money should you put up? Well, that's the conversation you should have with your agent that's representing you on the transaction, because that number ultimately is negotiable. It needs to be a number that shows a strong commitment. It doesn't need to be $10 or $50. It needs to be something a little bit substantial. So in case something happens in the end and you have to forfeit that earnest money, then the other side is going to feel like they've been made whole because they've had to take their house off the market during the closing process. But it also needs to be an amount that's not going to tie you up for the long term. So in other words, that money, it's not where you just write a check and the check gets held for 30 days. That money's going to go into escrow, typically with the title company, and that money needs to be something liquid that you're not having to buy groceries with, or you're not having to make a house payment with, or anything else you need that money for. So typically the amount is negotiated up front between the buyer and the seller of how much earnest money needs to go up. But again, it needs to be an amount that you can live without for 30 to 45 days until that transaction closes. Now, what happens to the money in the end? Do you lose it? If you follow through and the property closes on time and according to contract, then that money gets credited back to your closing costs. So you don't lose the money, it's just being held in escrow for a time. But again, earnest money is your way of showing a strong commitment that you're willing to follow through with the transaction that you've signed your name for to try to buy a piece of real estate.